Okay, all the cameras are going off here. And speaking of which, put your phones on vibrate. Or mine's on. Or turn them off. Because if your phone goes off in the middle of this forum, I get to ask you the questions. Great. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. It's a beautiful evening. It's much cooler inside than it is outside, thank goodness. The heat's on these guys, though, this evening. Many thanks to the North Mason Community Voice for putting on this forum. A lot of interest, of course, because of our proximity to the Trujillo Forest, and a lot of interest, I'm sure, from the citizens to learn what the candidates would be saying, not only about local issues, but state issues in the managing of a very important department. So these are our candidates, most of them, for the Washington State Commissioner of Public Lands. It oversees the Department of Natural Resources, and the department manages trusts to generate revenue and preserve forests, water, and habitat. I got two mics, this is great. And habitat. So the agency manages nearly 6 million acres of forest across the state for financial benefits to public schools, state institutions, and county services. The mission is, in partnership with citizens and governments, the Washington State DNR provides innovative leadership and expertise to ensure environmental protection, public safety, perpetual funding for schools and communities, and a rich quality of life. This is really an important position, not only in protecting the evergreen state, but also making sure that many agencies that depend on the forests in Washington State to keep solvent, like schools, have revenue coming. So tonight, we have 4 of the candidates. Glad to see you here. Y'all look pretty happy. Let's hope you're still smiling at the end of the night. I know you will be, especially with the baked goods that are back. So each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement, followed by 2 or 3 formal questions, which I have taken out of the hermetically sealed jar from my front porch. And then the audience will ask questions, and candidates will have a chance to respond there. And at the end, each of you will have a 1 minute to kind of wrap things up. And you'll have an opportunity to mingle and talk issues with the folks as well. Bob here is a stern taskmaster. So if we say a minute, it'll be a minute. Oh. Yes. It's not going to be like those wrestling matches that you go to. They have 5 or 6 matches going at once, and they start throwing towels at you to get you to stop. But he will be there catching you. So let's get ready to roll. Oh, actually, here we are. Here's one of our other candidates that just showed up. And this is Mary Werner.
Did you want
Excellent.
We need another mic
now.
Another
mic? Yeah, Can I give her this one, Diedrich, or do you have?
Set you down where you were going to be originally. Yeah.
Mary, how are you?
You had a good time. Thank you.
So did you get the rules?
2 minutes.
We'll have you give an opening statement, and then we'll have a number of questions we have. You'll have a minute to answer those questions. And then at the end, you'll be able to mingle and have fun with all the folks here from the North Mason Community Voice. So let's go to it. Let's start here with Karen. So what we'll do is we'll start and move down and then rotate as we go through here. So question number 1. Oh, yes. Sorry, brief statements. Thank you, Diedrich. Diedrich Allen with Mason Web TV, who is also affiliated with Hood Canal Communications, and also my stern taskmaster. And so let's actually start with a 2-minute statement from each of you as we go through, and Bob will keep an eye on you there. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm Karen Porterfield, and I'm running to be your next Commissioner of Public Lands. The Commissioner of Public Lands is the executive that leads the Department of Natural Resources. I have to say our moderator tonight did an excellent job in telling us all, educating us on what DNR does. So thank you for that. This is an important job. As I tell a lot of people, this is the most important job nobody knows about. This is a job to be effective. You need to be able to work with a large and wide variety of stakeholders. I'm pleased to let you know that my campaign chair is Brad Owen, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Washington, State Senator Marilyn Chase, a Democrat, and Bremerton Mayor Patty Lent, a Republican, because this, again, we need to be focused. So DNR has 4 responsibilities. It is responsible for revenue for our school trusts. It is the largest fire department in the state. It is responsible for our conservation and recreation agenda, and it does all of our compliance and permitting for timber harvesting on public and private land. But over the last 20 years, we have seen a steady decline in income from DNR, in real dollars of almost 2/3. So in the last year that we have our report for, DNR generated $313 million. If they had just stayed on task from where they were earlier, that would have been more than $900 million for our schools. So I am running because I have a 21st century agenda that I hope I get to share with you as we go through these questions. I am running because we have had disastrous fire seasons and we need to change. And I bring more than 25 years of executive experience to this position, plus a belief that we can build good government that serves our needs. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Stephen Nielsen. I'm the Libertarian candidate for the position of Commissioner of Public Lands for the state of Washington. I want you to consider, if you will, the following statement. If everyone owns it, nobody owns it. With regard to our federal forests, you can tell that nobody owns it and nobody is properly managing those forests. The number one problem in Washington state out of the forest is coming from the federal forest, and the mismanagement of the federal forest is putting the private and the public land in jeopardy. My name, like I said, is Stephen Nielsen, and I'm a rocket scientist. I'm an innovator, father of 3 daughters. So I have a vested interest in the future of the state, but I also am coming at this from a different angle. As an innovator, I'm a problem solver. I'm looking at abstract, new ideas because, like Karen said, we have to look at the transitional aspect of this office. What we've done in the past isn't going to work. Blaming climate change isn't going to work. We have to have effective solutions. We've got to come to the table and say, what are we doing to actively impact our resources in Washington state, diversifying our portfolio? Because believe it or not, this is not an environmentalist's chair. This is somebody who is going to be running a business for Washington state. And the customer is our schools. The customers are the communities and the jobs that are under barrage by environmentalists. I'm here to run a business for Washington state, to put money back in the coffers of Washington state and encourage investment and innovation in this office. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve McLaughlin. Thank you for having us here tonight. It's a real pleasure. I'm a native of the Pacific Northwest. I was born in Washington state and I grew up down in Oregon. After I graduated from the University of Oregon, I entered the United States Navy and I served for 25 years in executive management and leadership positions. My last job was at Naval Station Everett, and one of the things I got to do there was manage a 5,000-acre forest and also in charge of environmental oversight of aquatics and tidelands for a facility we had at Pacific Beach out on the Washington coast. In that job, I initiated an effort to save about 10% of those lands as a permanent old-growth forest, which is a perfect time for educational purposes, but it was one of the last old-growth forests in the northern Puget Sound. I'm running because I believe that we need to restore healthy forest and tidelands ecosystems in order to use working forests to mitigate on the preventive side the catastrophic wildfires that we've had in eastern Washington, but at the same time be able to do sustained yield harvesting of state trust lands in order to increase the amount of revenues for our schools and counties.
Good evening, I'm Hillary Franz, and it's an honor to be here. I have raised my 3 boys in Kitsap County for the last 16 and a half years, oftentimes traveling right through Belfair to go to the Olympic Forest as well as out to the coast. We all know, especially when you're sitting in Belfair and in this community, what a beautiful this state this is. You guys know it best, the forest lands, the farmlands, the Hood Canal, the waterways. But the truth is, our state faces significant challenges, from climate change to ever-growing population to wildfires and one of the worst droughts on record last year. My grandparents came here in the worst economic crisis and the worst environmental crisis of our nation. They left the Black Hills of South Dakota, the black blizzards where the farm had gone under, and they traveled with my father, who was 1 year old, out to the West Coast. And they were fortunate to land in Pierce County and be able to save up pennies and start farming, where they raised my father, and then I later on was grown up and raised by my grandparents and my father, understanding very closely the connection between our environment and our economy, as you yourself know very well. I spent 20 years working across the state in almost 3/4 of the counties of this state, from the most eastern part to the most western, protecting hundreds of thousands of acres of working farmlands and working forest lands, and ensuring that our local economies and communities who depend on those lands are able to grow their economy. I've helped also in the midst of the Great Recession as a local government official be able to put people who are back to work, who had been lost jobs in the construction industry, through training program at Olympic College, and then through an energy efficiency program and renewable energy program, so that we could actually create clean energy jobs. Right now, we need to ensure that the next person that steps in here, one, is able to help restore our forest health, to ensure that we are actually putting our working forest lands to productive use, as well as creating a clean energy economy. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mary Werner. You've heard about the complex responsibilities of the Commissioner of Public Lands, and I am a candidate who has experience in precisely those responsibilities, having led large, complex governmental agencies in natural resource management. In fact, I'm at the Department of Natural Resources today, have been there for 3 years, the 3 years of our worst wildfire seasons, and in fact, we're making great progress improving our wildfire response and our prevention efforts, which are largely focused around restoring forest health and ensuring that local fire departments and local private contractors have the skills and training and equipment to be able to respond. Prior to coming to this agency, I was also responsible for large, complex organizations as the mayor of the city of Spokane during the recession. I had an environmental agenda there, and we accomplished with the business community great progress in cleaning up the environment and protecting natural resources. And prior to that, I worked with Native American tribes here in the state of Washington for many years in precisely the portfolio of the Commissioner of Public Lands: forestry, range, agriculture, rivers, clean water, recreation, law enforcement, and emergency response. So in each of those areas that are part of the Commissioner of Public Lands portfolio, I have a depth of experience as well as the passion and the energy to take on this responsibility. I'm also a mother and a grandmother, and I've enjoyed bringing my grandchildren here and camping out on the Hood Canal and going shell fishing with them and going up into the old growth forest. I know how important it is for us in this generation to take great good care of what we have here, the beautiful resources of the state of Washington, so that my grandchildren's grandchildren can enjoy what we enjoy today when we go out together as a family. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening.
Great, thank you all. So we'll rotate through, since you got a chance to go first, Karen. We'll start with Stephen here, this Stephen. And the first question from the association here is, Department of Natural Resources managed properties have an impact on local communities, which benefit from the economic activity, but also must provide services such as law enforcement. How can the Department of Natural Resources help local communities maximize economic opportunities?
Thank you very much for the question. The best way that we can maximize opportunities is encourage investment in our resources in our state. So if we have more players at the table, we're going to see more return on those revenues. So if the question is about law enforcement, then that's something that we would provide for our lands. If the question is regarding how we're going to boost the economy, opening the lands for multi-use is what we need to do. And we also need to focus on the federal lands as well that have been shut off, and the private, warehousers and Green Diamond Sierra Pacifics that are starting to shut down their lands because of misuse. So we need to work together to ensure that the lands are accessible and open, and that will guarantee that there's a steady flow of individuals through our towns, through our communities, and they'll bring that revenue.
Great, thank you. And to reiterate, Bob has not had to push the buzzer yet, but 1 minute answers, and you all have been doing very great so far. Steve, same question. If you'd like me to restate it, I'd be glad to.
Please go ahead just one more time.
Okay. Department of Natural Resources managed properties have an impact on local communities, which benefit from economic activity, but also must provide services such as law enforcement. How can the state help local communities maximize economic opportunities?
I think that the first thing is to take a review of the lands that are currently out of service for a variety of reasons and determine if we can open some of those lands up or more of those lands up for recreation, for harvest, and for other uses that are good for the general public. I've seen in interviews a lot of problems or questions from horsemen, from motorcyclists and quad riders, from shooters that don't understand why they're all of a sudden being excluded. We can generate revenue by allowing these folks back into the forest that benefits our community, and also create jobs in those areas where we have those opportunities available in our forests and our aquatics lands.
Thank you. Great, thank you.
So the first thing that I would do is actually go to each region and create a local economic development community liaison. Because the truth is that when we work closely with a community, each community is very different. Their economic opportunity is very different. What is best for Benton County is different from what is best for Mason County. So I would work closely with the community to identify what are the economic opportunities here. Forestry, agriculture, recreation. And then what are the investments that are needed to be made in that community to actually ensure that that economic opportunity is possible. And then, as you know, once you invest in that community, that will actually increase the value of DNR's public lands, which will have a return investment on the revenue generation based under the trust. I've done similar work in Benton County, where in that case what they needed was actually an opportunity to invest in a great processing and refuse facility. When that facility went in, DNR lands that had been laying fallow, had not been used, were now put to actual great production, and now it's their new agricultural economic opportunity.
Thank you. Mary?
So your communities are surrounded by state land, and on that land we use those for multiple purposes. One of the things the agency has done fairly recently is engage a citizens advisory committee in the plan for the Tahuya and Green Mountain Forest. And in doing so, we've heard not only about recreational uses and forest extraction uses, but we've also heard a bit about what the community needs. We need to take that a deeper level and engage with your Economic Development Council, your Chamber of Commerce, and the large employers in the area. For example, there's large reinvestment by Sierra Pacific in Shelton in a new mill, and we need to make sure that we're looking not only at the immediate opportunities for recreation and tourism in your neighborhoods and in your communities, but also long-term, what kind of jobs are we going to have for your next generation of employees in your area?
Thank you. And Karen, you get to round out this question.
Okay, so in addition to cutting trees, we should be looking at 21st century opportunities. Wind and solar power energy generation, especially in eastern Washington on marginal lands, where appropriate, expansion of our shellfish and gooey duck contracts. They're filter feeders. They keep our Puget Sound and Hood's Canal clean. Ensuring that our land leases are at market rate. Current DNR employees have shared with me that there are some land leases that have not been renegotiated in more than 20 years. We should also be looking at ecotourism. And as several people have said here, if we do this correctly, we do this in partnership with our local communities, because you're right, what works for you here is not what's going to work over in the Wenatchee Forest, and it's not going to work if you're in Walla Walla. So we need to be working with you to build those opportunities.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to take a little pause here. Do any of you want some water?
I took care of myself, so
You
I'm
took
good.
care of that, okay.
I'm willing to share, though.
It's great tasting Belfair water, although you can't say it tastes because water's supposed to be what? Colorless, odorless, tasteless?
Yeah.
If it has taste? Okay, so we'll start with Stephen,
Number
the
two.
middle Stephen. And this is a question about the use of properties here. Because of the limited number of DNR enforcement officers, law enforcement on DNR properties often requires assistance from local agencies. What can be done to reduce the impact on local law enforcement?
Well, that can be done one of two ways. First off is look at increased grants for the counties to help with local law enforcement. Another one could also be to increase the staff at DNR. Preferably, it would be to the former, because this is laws that might be broken or need to be enforced within our own counties, and the crosstown agreement between the DNR police and sheriff's departments it seems to be the better way. And the reason it's the better way is there are only 11 DNR officers in the state to cover the entire state, and that's not very many for all the public lands that we have. And so it's best to work with sheriff's departments and other law enforcement officers to do that.
For me, I think that the biggest context is actually working with the community. The community is the eyes and ears, right? They're the ones that care most about the public lands and opportunities for recreation and other resources. What that means then is absolutely we should be looking for more funding and grant opportunities for local law enforcement, but we should also be partnering with our communities that care so much about their recreation opportunities so that they can be providing volunteer. I know in this community especially, you all care so much about your forest lands, your waterways, and the access to those, and you don't want that access to be discontinued. That's a huge opportunity for partnership and collaboration, and it would be working with the community, not only law enforcement, but also opportunities for volunteering.
I'm pleased to say that we actually have 12 law enforcement officers now for the entire state of Washington for DNR. So those cross-deputization agreements are essential to us and to support local law enforcement in helping us. A block watch type program is also very much appreciated, and for us to be able to establish a hotline and then to emphasis patrol your area, when you continue to report incidents, it gives us the opportunity to target how those law enforcement officers use their time. So for us to be able to set up that hotline for you and ask for your help so that we can use those limited resources effectively, I think is the best way we're going to be able to leverage the little bit of resources that we have.
Thank you.
Sadly, there's not a whole lot of money available in Olympia to hire additional help. We all know that the McCleary discussion this next year is going to take a majority of the funding. Currently, DNR does not have a strong partnership with Fish and Wildlife. Has been shared by current Fish and Wildlife people. We depend on them. We depend on our local sheriff and our other public safety groups. We have to improve those relationships. We have to figure out how to work more effectively together. And we have to figure out within DNR how we do our job better so we can apply that money into law enforcement.
Thank you.
The DNR oversees over 5 million acres of aquatic agriculture and forest land. To expect that there are 12 individuals who are going to be responsible for that is asinine. I think the answers that we've heard so far are correct. The owners of that land are you. It's your backyard, right? So we are going to need community volunteers. We're going to need to work with local law enforcement, and the money may not be there, so we need to work on cooperatives, whether they're grants or otherwise, and we need to see specifics about what the needs of each individual community are. But you can't expect a centralized model where we've got our resources spread too thinly. We need decentralization, we need community ownership of those roles and responsibilities, and we need to hear from the communities across the state, whether it's in Republic, which is quite remote, or it's out here where there's probably some tweaker action. I mean, let's just be honest, right? So let's own our own community, right? Decentralized solutions are what's going to serve best in this position.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Actually, as we're moving through here, there are two more set questions, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience that you might have of the candidates. And if you have questions, come on up. I've got lots of mics to share, and we'll get you going. And if two aren't enough, Diedrich probably has another one down there somewhere. Actually, you've got two more. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and we're going to start now here with Hillary. Yeah. Heavy recreational use of DNR properties results in litter, trash, and vandalism, which impacts local communities. who are typically the ones to provide cleanup. What can be done to reduce the impact on local communities of these actions?
Well, I mean, this is similar to the question we just had before, which is, again, we need to be, one, educating our community about the importance of these areas, and not only the importance of these areas for people to be able to get out and enjoy, but also for the local economy. And when they're being vandalized, then it takes away from that critical resource for the community, as well economically and socially in the recreation side. I think, again, it's a partnership. It's a partnership of DNR working with the local community, local law enforcement, as well as the local community volunteers and organizations. One of the great things is your community is a model in how you have a volunteer task force that is working on the Tahuya and making sure that that forest stays open and accessible and that is able to be used by many different types of recreation users, and that we aren't prohibiting that access. The only way that happens is through that engagement and community volunteer piece coupled with law enforcement and DNR being responsible and working closely with the community to make that happen.
Great, thank you.
So as we try to deconflict the various uses of our state lands, this gives us also an opportunity to work with different user groups in different areas of the forest. So in other words, when we have shooting activity, which we appreciate on state lands, then we need to make sure that we have a designated shooting area so that those who enjoy target shooting, and I'm one of them, can be responsible as a group for self-policing ourselves as a group to make sure that we clean up our shell casings and clean up after ourselves. The same thing for horseback riding trails, hiking trails, off-road vehicles, mountain biking, so that communities who are sharing an interest in how they use the state land can help to police one another and make sure that we appreciate the land and take care of it. There are people, of course, who are going to abuse the state land and bring in truckloads and just dump them. And in that instance, it's incumbent upon all of us to try our best to find the identification of those who have abused our state lands and hold them accountable. So it's a combination of self-policing, of making sure we report. If it's not reported, then we're not able to look at trends and enforce against them.
Thank you.
As a campfire girl, I was taught to leave my campsite better than I found it. We have an education opportunity ahead of us for a whole new generation of people we'd like to get engaged out in our beautiful land, and we need to do that. But picking up on something Steve said earlier, this also is a decentralization question. Our local DNR staff, the employees, should be working with local communities to identify where we have particularly bad or constant areas. Of course, that first question, do we have enough places for people to throw away their garbage? Do we pick it up often enough? Do we have the signs up? Have we educated people? This is going to be a challenge. Anybody who's walked across a parking lot, sat in a bus stop, or walked into one of our libraries and see what people leave. We have to teach people across the board to be light on this earth.
So I was in Seattle at an interview on Friday for The Stranger, and I showed up about an hour and a half early because the ferry schedule said that that's when I would get to Seattle. And as I was waiting, I walked around and I was looking for a Starbucks. Apparently there's not one on every corner. It took a couple of blocks to find one, but then there were two across the street from one another. Sorry, Tully's, you're out of business. It was Starbucks. And what I found in the back alley of every single road there and in the parking lots was trash, litter, just waste everywhere. So why would we expect that people who don't respect their own city and town, and I'm sure we see it around our own communities, would be self-policing themselves? So what we have to do is we have to be vigilant. We have to go out and volunteer and clean up our own lands. If people are breaking the law and we catch them, there are already laws on the books. Restricting where people can shoot and how people can shoot are not going to make people clean up their casings. People are going to use their casings properly or police themselves one way or the other. My time's up and I'll stop there.
Okay, great, thank you all. And this is kind of a wonky question, but I think it's really important for governmental cooperation.
You want to
You
finish?
left one out.
Oh,
The other
sorry,
Steve.
Steve.
The other Steve. I got your back.
Thanks, Hillary.
I do. I got your back.
Sorry.
Well, that's okay.
I'm sitting here, wait.
I'll take a
Good
check
job.
later. Everybody here at this table is right about what we need to do. I think, understanding ecosystem health and healthy working forest and also ecosystem restoration plays a significant role in, getting our forests and tidelands back to where they need to be. And a big part of this process in bringing that about to the folks is education. And by engaging in an education program to teach people about ecosystem health and what this system really is, because it's not just the forest, it's not just water, it's not just tidelands. If we can educate people to understand the issues of why we need to keep these systems clean, I think we'd go a long way, in addition to what everybody at this table has stated earlier.
Thank you for your grace, Steve. And thank you for looking out for Steve.
My
Hillary.
pleasure.
That's very nice of you. Okay, wonky question. Negotiations for right-of-ways, easements, and access have long been problematic for agencies working with the Department of Natural Resources. How would you or could you make this process more predictable and timely than it is now?
That is a wonky question, and it has to do with the staff available to engage in the process so that those who are looking for an easement or a right-of-way actually have someone who can carry that negotiation all the way through from start to finish, not have to pass it off to somebody else and not have to put it aside, but to be able to finish it. Also to make sure that those staff are trained well enough so that they can understand where not only the agency is coming from, but where the other party is coming from. And it's really important for us to listen to what is the other party's objective. Not just to be state government and this is what government wants, but what does the other party want and need out of that negotiation. So it's a matter of making sure that we have sufficient staff who are adequately trained, who are listening to our stakeholders, because the agency is here to serve the people, not the other way around.
So as somebody who, when I was younger, I was a project manager on construction projects, I had more than one permit returned to me. Sometimes they said, you just have to fix it. When I said, how? They said, bring us back something else. Was not very helpful. So many people have told me that the current permitting process does not feel fair, is not transparent, and people are not clear about what the decision-making process is. So that's where you start. We have clarity of what we're going to be reviewed on. There is transparency of the process, and we understand the time that it is going to take to go through that. That's what we call process fairness. At the end of the day, we can't guarantee that everybody's going to like the final decision, but they should at least be able to say, I understand why, and I can make a choice if I wish to meet the additional requirements you are placing on me, or I can walk away. Right now, in working with DNR, we have neither.
Right, I think Karen hit the nail on the head. Simplification and clarification of the process. The DNR, just like every other agency in Olympia, is bloated. There are unnecessary rules, regulations, and it is a very complicated process. How many of you have ever applied for a DNR permit, easement permit? So you've been through it. It's not a simple process. So looking at the rules and regulations on hand right now and minimizing to the fullest extent that we possibly can to simplify that process, because you are the customer, we are the provider, right? So we have to make it easy for you. Fair enough?
This is not a wonky question at all. In fact, it is a question that is causing a lot of angst amongst the citizens of Washington. Last week, I was in a town where I was shown more than 3 pages on an Excel spreadsheet of roads that have been closed by DNR in this county, and they don't know why. 2 days ago, I met a man, 75-year-old man, who has an easement to property that he owns between his place and he has to cross DNR land. He can't get to it because there's now a gate on that property. We have to be a lot more transparent, because what we're doing by the DNR and other federal land managers is we are creating an adversarial relationship between these agencies and the people, and it's time to start creating some goodwill to clean up that reputation. We have to work with our customers, which are the people. We are the stewards for those people, and it's time we start behaving appropriately in government to reduce those angsts.
As a 20-year attorney who's worked on multiple easements and right-of-way issues across the state, I can say I know firsthand that it is a long, drawn-out process, which is painstaking, costs people time and energy, and costs agencies time and energy. The first thing I would do is, one, ensure that we had in place an efficient process for processing the right-of-way permits. Second, I would make sure that there was a message from the leadership on top that we will do everything to work with our communities and our property owners. And what that means is, it is about being willing to actually understand the issue and work towards solutions, not put up barriers and make it harder and harder to be able to solve it, but instead say, we're going to be the creative ones that works with the community to make sure it's an efficient, effective, streamlined, and successful process.
Great, thank you all. Okay, now it's your turn. Do we have some folks with some questions? Come on up.
So at work,
I would like to share my bounteous mics with you. And we'll be starting with Karen.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kelly McIntosh, and I have been a fire commissioner here in North Mason Regional Fire District for 15 years. And over those 15 years, we've watched the wildland fire season starting sooner and lasting longer. So my question to you is, what are you going to do about fuels management, and what's your philosophy on that?
Good question. So we have two parts of fire we look at, prevention and suppression. Under prevention, we should be looking at being able to do controlled burns early in the season. We lag far behind the other western states in our controlled burns. We should be working for forest health. We should be thinning where possible, and we should be treating where we need to. Monoculture planting can create big challenges. So we need to address how we maintain the health of our forests. We should, on the prevention side, if we have a fire, our first goal, keep it small. Empower our local fire districts to be able to start addressing that fire. Ensure that they do have the training. Let's get that equipment out there. Let's make sure our memos of understanding are there. Think about how we use our mix of aerial where appropriate. Improve our communications. Last year we had fire groups that were less than 2 miles apart. Okanagan could not talk to each other. I ran out of time.
That's all right, because it'll continue here, because this is that question that we always get. It's that softball question. So we're all very well versed on this. And the solution is simple. As Karen said, first and foremost, my philosophy is cut. You got to get the deadwood out. You got to get the fuels out. So what I would do is I'd go in on day one and I'd start a forest triage plan. All right, we've got to go into those areas that we know are dead, that we know are putting state infrastructure and private infrastructure in direct jeopardy, and we've got to clear those out. All right, the question is, well, is there a market for that wood? Yes, there is a market for that wood. If not, then we can definitely store that, and we can look at the alternatives. But we've got to spend some money up front so that we're not spending a lot of money for firefighting at the backside of this. Then once you do your forest triage, then you got to go in and you got to do proper maintenance. You got to make sure that there's the right number of roots in the ground for the amount of water. Whether or not the climate is changing, we've got to make sure that we're flexible in how we're handling our forest management. And then we've got to work with our local jurisdictions to make sure that they are properly trained to fight those fires as soon as they pop up so they don't become mega complex fires.
Fire system management is, we need fire in the forest to make it healthy. We have to have controlled burns to remove excess fuel and forest duff, especially on the east side of the state, to allow water to percolate down through to recharge aquifers. But we also need to remove and do laddering in our forests, and we need to create forests that are thinner where they're not choked up, because that's what causes a fire to go to crown, which makes it catastrophic. We need to be able to engineer our forests in a way to create buffer zones along the urban wildland interface to allow fires to go from crown to ground if they do burn, and in the meantime, work to reduce fuel loads throughout the forest. On attack, we have to, until we have these healthy forests that are sustainable ecosystems, we have to quickly and aggressively attack a fire using early local suppression efforts first.
So first, thank you for your service. Thank you. Second, you guys, your community is a model with its wildfire management plan. Thank you for that as well. That always helps. Here's my approach. Number one, proactive is always more effective than reactive. We need to restore our forest health. Reality is we need to be implementing prescriptive burning, prescribed thinning, or selective thinning, excuse me. We need to ensure that we're cleaning up the woody debris and that we're also diversifying our forest stock. Two, on the suppression side, we absolutely need to be working with our local fire teams, training with our DNR teams, and making sure that we are in a coordinated, collaborative way putting out those fires earlier and sooner. In addition to that, we need to be helping work with the Committee on Emergency Preparedness so that when those fires do get out of hand, that people know what to do and when and where to go. Lastly, it's absolutely critical, as we know, that with larger fire season and the fact that they're getting worse and worse, we need funding. And part of my work in the last 5 years in the legislature has been to secure funding. I helped pass the largest transportation package in Washington state history, and the way you do that is working on both sides of the aisle to stress the importance of it and how important it is for public health and safety in our natural resource industries.
You're hearing common themes because it's common sense that we have to get in and thin these overstock stands to make sure that we're removing the excess fuel. Then we need a place to take that fuel. And so to build markets and work with our forest products industry so that we can actually have an end use for that fuel is also important, so we can't forget that piece of it. And there are efforts underway to do exactly that. Prescribed burning is an appropriate tool after mechanical thinning. Right now our stands are so overstocked that that can't be used first. We have to mechanically treat and then come in with prescribed burn. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan for this area identifies the values at risk, and we need to clear around those values first to make sure that we're protecting people and communities. I am an advocate for fire breaks, and we need to make sure that the roads are used as fire breaks as well.
Great, thank you. Very good, thank you. Come on up.
Well, name a challenge and an opportunity with respect to aquatic resources. What's going on in the aquatic resources that you think is important that we hear about?
And we'll start with you, Steve.
All right. So if I understand the question, so name a challenge and an opportunity in aquatics. All right, so it should be understood that there are two different elements of aquatics. There's the freshwater and the saltwater. One thing I do not want to see out of the DNR is what we're doing right now, or what they're attempting to do right now, is to move into freshwater aquatic reserves. What that does is it puts a lot of extra jurisdiction and a lot of authority over freshwater. They're looking at Lake Kapowsin as one of those elements. And how many of you are waterfowl hunters? You know that your shot went from lead shot to steel shot. If you have an environmental control over the mud underneath a lake, how soon do you think before you can no longer use lead weights for fishing? So I think a great opportunity right now in the DNR is to stop what they are attempting to do with freshwater aquatic reserve before it starts at Lake Kapowsin and spreads to eastern Washington.
I think with aquatics management, it starts from source to sea for one. But it starts with forest management, which is where the sources of most our streams and rivers emanate. So a tree gobbles up about 80 gallons of water per day. With choked up forests, those trees are gobbling up water that can be used to recharge aquifers and create a healthier water system. In the meantime, we have to work together, community and government agencies, to promote stream health, enhance fisheries, and enhance the shell fishing beds here in the Puget Sound to ensure that we have clean water for those fish and shellfish to propagate. The good news is that would increase our yields and allow for greater access for sportsmen. And I think, water is our most important resource on this planet. We have to take care of it. And it's got to be an all-hands effort to make that happen.
Having worked on thousands of miles of shoreline, including around the Puget Sound all the way out to the coast in Pacific and Grays Harbor County, on policies and protections, the context for DNR is it has three technical responsibilities in aquatic lands. One is to ensure the protection of those for the environment, for the economy, and for recreation. We need to make sure that we are providing access to our water bodies for people and for recreation and public access, which so many times gets shut off. Two, we need to make sure that we're protecting our fish and wildlife habitat, not just for the environment, but for the recreation opportunities that it provides, as well as the economic. And lastly, as we know, our shellfish industry is one of the biggest, strongest economies we have. You know it right here in this community, all the way out to Pacific and Grays Harbor County. We need to make sure that we are protecting those beds and increasing the opportunities for the communities there.
A couple of big challenges for aquatics are ocean acidification and then runoff. And for us to intercept runoff to make sure that those pollutants are not continuing to damage the aquatic environment, and to look at what is occurring and do some research around what is occurring with ocean acidification are challenges for us as we enter into times when the ocean chemistry is changing drastically. Opportunities around that include opportunities for research. They also include opportunities for us to work with the shellfishing industry to see how we can actually use the shellfish beds and the shellfish aquaculture to look at ways to restore the healthy environment for shellfish. We also have opportunities for what they call blue carbon, which is to restore our eelgrass beds and then to look at how much carbon can be absorbed in our eelgrass beds. So we do have some big challenges around aquatics, but it's also an exciting time for us, although scarily exciting. We do have exciting opportunities to prepare future generations so that they too can enjoy aquatic lands.
So I would say our biggest threat is also our biggest opportunity. Our beaches and near shores are more than 100 years of first bad decision making and then uneducated decision making. We should not be willing to accept preservation of what we currently have for our aquatics. We should want them restored to health. And when we restore them to health, we now have establishment of our eelgrass beds, and as Mary said, critical. That goes a long way in helping us reestablish our salmon runs. Being able to address and bring our nearshore and our beaches back to health increases the opportunities for our shellfish and gooey ducks. Not only is it wonderful for us as a revenue source, but these are filter feeders and ensure that we have clean water that we all want to recreate in, take our kids to, and live by. So if we address and are willing to bring our beaches and near shores back to health, we are going to have some amazing opportunities.
Great, thank you. Over here. And then over here. Okay, so let's start here, and I see three people over here.
Good evening. I just want to say thank you for being here. You guys are all really well versed. It's very interesting listening to you. My question is, what role do you see the DNR playing in establishing a carbon trade system in Washington State?
I'd start on this, I believe, right? First off, I think what we really need to look at is carbon sequestration and how it works. As trees grow at their rapid rate, they sequester carbon very quickly. And as they start slowing in their growth, that sequestration starts to slow down. By the time they're old age, there's pretty much none. And so if we can use those trees at their peak periods to sequester carbon and then harvest, we then take and mill that wood product into buildings and help sequester carbon in the wood that's in the buildings that we have in our cities, in our towns, and in everything we do. Bottom line is everything that we eat, wear, and that's in this building was either mined, harvested, or grown up as a plant or animal species. And we rely on it. So why not just use the carbon sequestration in those buildings and materials that we have that we use on an everyday basis.
So I think we have a huge opportunity here to, one, look at those areas, our critical forests that are old growth and have been taken offline or will be because of habitat, to set up a model that we utilize that for a carbon trust opportunity, where we have private companies. Microsoft has done this in our state, that we could be a model where they're investing because they care about reducing their climate impact, and then it helps set it aside to protect it. I think we need to be cognizant, though, there that it has an impact on our local communities and our local economies. So how can we actually start to grow our working forest lands? We have lost so much of our forest lands to population growth and sprawl that has taken it offline, and we need those for our communities. We need it not only for our economy, but we need it for our environment, and we need it for recreation. So I'd want to come at it from twofold opportunity of, one, being able to utilize it to reduce our climate impact, but also to be able to ensure that we can maybe grow and expand our working forest lands in Washington State.
An important role for DNR is to ensure that the public lands are available and are being used to help us better understand carbon sequestration on forest and agriculture and aquatic lands. So setting up research plots and pursuing opportunities such as the Nisqually Carbon Reserve, where we're looking at what different rotation periods for trees actually do. Does a shorter rotation period or a longer rotation period sequester more carbon? That's something that we can and should do on the public lands to help us better understand that challenge. We also need to promote wood products, because buildings made of wood are made of sequestered carbon. And for us to be able to advance that is something that I actually pursue. I'm on a presidential board called the National Institute of Building Sciences, and we've been very eager to see the Green Building Council certify Washington wood products and other wood products for building, because we know that growing the trees helps sequester carbon, and using building materials made out of wood helps us sequester carbon. So in both of those, DNR is actively involved.
In the early 1970s, we really saw the market for recycled products take off when government required that a minimum of 20% of the paper that we all use in our copiers was recycled paper. Government has this opportunity to help establish a market until our for-profit side can figure out, the business side, how to make money at it. We set aside a significant amount of trees for our habitat conservation plans to protect our streams and boundaries, and for recreation purposes. To assume that the only way we can make money from a tree is to cut a tree is pretty 19th century. So we have some real amazing opportunities where we can help establish a market, support a varied use on our lands, meet climate change needs, and put more revenue in our schools.
All right, contrary to what Karen said, government should not be establishing markets, and we've seen with these carbon markets that they fail time and time again. I believe that they're on third iteration in the markets in which they've attempted to be set up. What I believe in, and I think the question was in regard to a California-style carbon credit, I am not in favor of that. I'm in favor of the private market in looking at investment in tangible assets. When we cut a tree, when we cut a plot, we leave behind about 50% of biomass. There is a market for biomass, whether it's engineered wood product, whether it is use for restoration. If the issue really is global climate change, then you go to areas like the Loess Plateau in China, and you can use our biomass to mulch the deserts in China, and they've done this in over 15 years. They've turned their deserts back into forests and grasslands. So there is a market for it, and it is tangible, and it is not a pie-in-the-sky carbon credit, feel good about yourself because you're Microsoft and I'm just going to pay some money. Let's invest in real product that can really help our economy and the world.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Hillary.
Good evening. I'm here as a sportsman and a public landowner, and my main concern is state trust lands. And in the State Enabling Act, it says that our state trust lands have to be profitable or they have to be sold. And I keep hearing about logging on these state trust lands. And my question is, how are you going to ensure these lands stay profitable if they're logged? And how are you going to ensure that my kids get to enjoy these public lands that I've grown up to love? How are they going to be profitable for 50 years when there's no trees.
Thank you. So, as a mom of 3 boys myself, we know that there is a trust relationship that DNR has where much of their revenue must go to help support schools and the education. It's about 8% of the capital budget for building schools. We can't ignore that trust relationship, but the reality is, as we look at our forestry, it's a very volatile market. It's an up and down. It doesn't provide certainty for our schools. We need to be looking at diversifying our revenue streams so it's not just based on, and it's not just based on forest, but needing to make sure we're looking at increasing our agricultural use on our ag lands, because obviously we need critical food sources and we're going to need it even more with climate change and growing population. We need to look at the opportunities for increasing revenue for renewable energy, wind, solar, geothermal, and others, because this not only increases local economies, it also helps us to start to become more independent on our energy source. And I've lost time, but we have a larger conversation. Yes. It's hard to answer that question in 1 minute because that is a whole hour. Yep, and we need to be actually replanting and expanding our forest lands, frankly.
We got
'Cause we've
time for
lost
that
more.
afterwards. Excellent. Mary?
I'm really glad to hear that you say that you are a public landowner. You, in fact, are. All of you are owners of our public lands. And we do need to manage these lands sustainably so that we have a yield for present and future generations. And the way we do that is to ensure that we are looking at multi-species, multi-story, and replanting and making sure that we have a sustainable yield off the land, not a one-time cut. So I agree with Hillary, and we've had our speeches on the campaign trail, so we kind of know each other's thinking about this, and we are diversifying our portfolio so that we're no longer relying so much on timber revenue for the trust beneficiaries. At the same time, we have to take care of those forests, so we need to continue to actively manage them, and when we actively manage them and we remove wood products from them, of course we need to get the best price for it. And sometimes we hold a sale until we can get a better price. But that other woody material that needs to come out of the woods, develop markets for that, make sure that we're getting a good price for all of those products that come out of the forest, as well as the standing timber and the merchantable timber that we take out. But Hillary's litany of the different things that we can do to diversify the lands, I think we all agree that diversifying our portfolio helps our forest lands.
Can you repeat the question once more? It's been a long workday.
I think that the context was making...
Insurance sustainability. Thank you so much. I think that this is one of the biggest challenges we currently have, is finding the balance between supporting our schools and ensuring long-term sustainability. Look, we don't have enough trees to cut our way to the needs we have for our schools. We have to expand our portfolio. This was one of the reasons why I was the first person to declare and run against, at that time, our sitting incumbent, because we needed to move past trees. Last year, 67% of the revenue from DNR came from cutting trees. Instead of talking about how we manage our trees, we need to talk about how we grow the pie bigger. And that is, as we've talked about, wind and solar, that is ensuring our land leases are at market rate, our communication towers are at market rate. We are a significant landowner, and the fact we have contracts out there that have not been negotiated in more than 20 years, we're leaving money on the table. So we have to be nimble, and we have to be open to new opportunities, and we can no longer continue to work the way we have in the past.
Excellent question. Thank you for asking it. The question is about the profitability of the land, and the issue in Washington State, because of the rising values of land for urban growth, the University of Washington projects that over the next 30 years in the Puget Sound area, we're going to lose forest zoned to urban zone at about 1 million acres over 30 years. So not only is that an impact to local mills, that's an impact to the future forests, right? So we're reducing that renewable resource. So what we have to do is we know what that forecast is, we have to work the state like a business and not like a preservation environmentalist society. We need to conserve, which means work the forest, manage the forest so that the forests that we do have are profitable and are healthy for maximum revenue return over 30, 60, and 90 year, and I have a plan for that. But we also need to do what Karen said, is focus on resource diversification, including industrial hemp, including tideland, including 3D farming in saltwater.
So in terms of creating revenues, one of the things we need to do first is take a look at the forest lands that we have taken out of production and see if there's anything we can do about that. Another thing we have to take a careful look at is the prescriptions for each type of cut that we do in the forest to ensure that we're creating, rather than a stripped off area of land like a DNR plot or two I saw last week, and come in with prescriptions that match the climate and aspect and terrain. Then on and the other thing is about this job is that the Commissioner of Public Lands must adhere specifically and very carefully to execute the disbursement of trust funds. You can't waver from that or break that trust. Right now, it's a constitutional mandate that we must protect. And until the legislature or it is voted to change that trust, we have to keep executing as per the letter of the law. Finally, in terms of recreation, we need to create those opportunities that allow local revenues to grow and enable people to get back into the forest and tidelands to enjoy that piece of wilderness or forest that they love.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening, candidates. My name is Mel Armstrong, and my issue is a place to shoot recreationally on DNR properties. I started this issue with DNR about 12 years ago, and I've been after it ever since, and we've made a modicum amount of progress recently, but there's also a great increase in the pressure and interest in a place to shoot. The Washington Administrative Code 332 provides that it is a legal activity on DNR property as long as it's done in a safe and sane manner. And the latest issue of the DNR Recreational Update says DNR manages state land for a diverse public recreational opportunities. So I'd like to ask each of you, how would you address this issue and ensure that we do have a place that's a good place to shoot? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. I absolutely agree with you, and recreational shooting is an important opportunity, especially I wanted my son to learn how to hunt, and I wanted him to learn how to shoot, and it's most important that we provide that outdoor opportunity for him and for all of us. So the way we must do that is to de-conflict with the other recreational uses and to set aside areas that are safe for shooting and to make sure that we have the appropriate backstops, that we provide the amenities necessary for the shooters to be able to, have trash barrels and have access, and to not have others conflict with the shooters' uses. It's not just deconflicting shooters with others, it's others not riding their mountain bikes through the middle of your shooting zone. So to designate those areas, to make sure that they're berms that we can occasionally sweep to get the lead out, and to make sure that others know that these areas are designated for shooting and they should not enter them.
One of the key requirements for the Commissioner of Public Lands is public safety, both for the people who are shooting and people who want to have other recreational opportunities. But this question goes beyond just this, because we also have to balance people who want to use off-road vehicles. We want to balance people who want to explore by horseback, or people like me who are foot-propelled. How do we ensure safety and accessibility for everybody to enjoy the great outdoors the way we want to? And so we can find that balance. The challenge is finding the balance, having the conversation with local communities, identifying the appropriate places, and again, number one, public safety.
I'm going to speak very plainly so that the folks online get this. When you increase regulations and you prescribe shooting zones, you make a criminal out of anybody who violates that. Me, my parents, my children, when I take my 3 daughters up to shoot, if we decide to shoot under current law in a safe and sane way, which means into a berm, into a backstop, not over hills, not across rivers, not across roads. If you know the rules and regulations, then you are doing safe things. You're not shooting at hikers, you're not shooting at bikers, you're not shooting at folks in cars or trucks or horses. To think that we need to prescribe shooting locations is only going to make a criminal out of the folks who decide to find a safe location in the forest to do a recreation that has been part of American history since before our founding, recreational shooting. The government does not need to prescribe shooting zones in our state forests.
I'm a certified NRA instructor, and I have been for many years. And I grew up, you know, with that first Red Ryder BB gun when I was 6, and I've had one ever since. The point here is every firearms owner must know what the basic rules of firearms safety are. And from there, what's wrong with going out in the forest and having fun? Taking my kids out in the forest, they love going out to shoot. Again, the key is it's everybody's responsibility to be responsible when it comes to hiking or motorcycle riding or shooting. You know what the risks are, know what might hurt yourself and others, and then practice safe practices with that discipline to watch out for you and others. Bottom line is, we can't, as Steve said, we can't regulate everything we do. Let's just be sensible about this, and everybody cooperate together to create, fun for everybody. Thanks.
So our public lands are important to provide recreational use to all different types of users, from trail hikers to mountain bikers to AV users to shooters. And the key is for us to recognize, one, there's a growing use in recreation, which is a great thing for our state. It's a great thing for our communities. Second is to recognize, yes, with each one of these uses, we do have conflicts, right? We have to be recognizing that. We need to make sure that we are providing the opportunities for every single type of recreation user, and that we're doing it in a regional way, so it's not just in one part of our state. Then we need to make sure that we're actually putting in education and policies that make sure that you can enjoy your opportunity for shooting and somebody else isn't crying foul, but they understand that this is the area for shooting and they have an area for their hiking or other type of recreation use, and making that education clear, and then also the policies and the approach.
We'll start with Karen here, and Margie has a question. Any other people we have Herb back here. Any others in here? So I've got, gotcha.
Hello, I'm Margie Benson. I live in Tahuya River Valley. We have just recently found out that DNR is looking for a gun range. They're saying 7 miles from our house, but as the crow flies over this weekend, we find it to be 1 mile. We've dodged bullets for the 27 years I've lived there. Occasionally, we hear the semi-automatics and the rifles and everything shooting over the weekend, but that's not why I'm here right now. The reason I'm here is you're talking about forest fires. And when I was out on the little adventure over the weekend, we found one of the gun ranges. I think Herb said it's shoe fly something. And it had a huge fire pit. And not counting all the garbage, but they were target shooting. So if we're trying to prevent forest fires, why would DNR, and it's just an unofficial site, allow these huge fire pits to be there? Can't burn garbage. What would be the purpose? I know they're not roasting marshmallows. So basically that's it. Why would you have a huge, or do you even know, fire pit in the middle of the forest? Well, plus we have one way in our community and one way out. So if there's a fire, it's big for us.
It is. As you pointed out, this was an unofficial site. So I doubt that DNR, and we certainly will have Mary speak for DNR, but in DNR's defense here, I would be very surprised if they knew what was going on. And when you have these types of kind of unofficial or unsupervised sites, these are some of the things that can happen, which is why you want to move to a more sorry, Steve, regulated approach for public safety.
I was just waiting to hear what the rest of the list of things that we are going to regulate were. Ladies, you can go ahead and continue. It sounds like this fire pit
I'm gonna stand over here.
is not DNR sponsored.
Just got on fire.
Right. Hey, there's no fire. Right? Look, just like with using firearms, just like with starting fires in the woods. Look, I go camping with my family as well. We're not going to start a massive fire. We're not going to bring pallets and burn and chop down trees or harvest a lot and make giant bonfires. Now there are some times and places for that, usually in the desert and usually when people are Burning Man, things like that, right? Bonfires. That's a good place. Inside the forest, not smart. And we got to use common sense. So if we see people acting inappropriately, we've got to regulate ourselves, and we've got to tell folks, whether they're shooting into the air and it's over your house, encourage our friends and family not to do those unhealthy and unsafe things. And if people are making massive fires, then we need to probably contact law enforcement and have somebody come in and take a look at that site.
I'm a lifelong mountaineer, climber, and backpacker. And one of the things that we've learned in that discipline, or those disciplines, is leave no trace. And part of this problem boils down, I think, a little bit to education and teaching maybe and expanding this no trace ethic to other sports that we participate in the outdoors. But the other element to this, and I sympathize with you because this is about treating everybody with dignity and respect and respecting each and every resident's property rights and rights to live in a quiet, peaceful place. And again, I think what that does is it boils back to the individuals that are going out to those places. And if we can educate and do a better job of educating with respect to those ethics, in addition to the shooting safety rules, I think we might find some good answers without having to regulate everything. Dignity and respect, and leave no trace. Thank you.
Your community's wildfire management plan set out very clearly the way some of your wildfires are getting started. And you know very well how often some of those are based on simple recreation activities where people are not being thoughtful and it's careless and it's so number one, you've already done the work of starting to identify these issues, which is absolutely important. The second part is the role then for DNR is back to the context. The community is the eyes and ears, right? You heard 12 law enforcement for a statewide organization. We need to be working with local law enforcement. We need to be working with community volunteers. And when you in your community see something like that, that we have a call center set up, right? That immediately we're able to respond to that, whether we're going out there or we're calling local law enforcement or the volunteer community, force that you have to be able to respond. But it's going to have to be a team collaborative effort or we're not going to be successful.
So we're talking about the difference here between responsible recreation and irresponsible recreation. That's irresponsible recreation, and it's abuse of the public lands. So that's not fair to everyone else who owns and uses the public land, and that does require law enforcement response. It's not regulation, it's being smart about shared use of public land. I'm glad you like my hotline idea. I agree that we need an ability to call law enforcement when this is happening, keep a record of the number of calls so that we know when there's a problem area. I'm pleased to say that the Department of Natural Resources was able, with the NRA, to secure some legislation a couple of years ago that made the use of exploding targets illegal on public land because it was getting out of control. I'm sorry, I know it looks cool, I've watched the YouTube videos, but when people were using exploding targets on public land, it was causing fire, and then the next thing you know, it's let's put that in the crook of a tree, and then we're blowing up standing timber that belongs to the public. And so we really, unfortunately, have some bad actors who make it difficult for everybody else, and it's important for us as communities to monitor that and report it.
Thank you. We'll start with Herb here, and then I had, I believe, you, and now we have, wow, okay. Things are hopping. I'm stunned that you have a question, Herb.
How dare me?
What does that mean?
I would love to debate the recreational shooting and the fire and that sort of stuff. I do volunteer for DNR here, so I've got lots of insight, but I don't want to waste your time on that one. I want to thank you for getting me upset. I figured I would come here and be able to choose who I'm going to vote for, but with the answers you people are giving me, you're not helping me any in that respect. Now for my question. Sustainable harvest. I understand there's a state law that says DNR will have the sustainable harvest so we can harvest trees forever and ever. However, it is a statewide criteria. I think it needs to be changed to county-wide. Mason County is pretty much getting to be a clear cut. And it's horrible to see, and it happened the last time too, and then it's 30 to 50 years, there's nothing going on, and then it comes back to cutting the trees down, and we're going to cut them all because they're all the same age. So I would like you to think about that, and let me have your comments as what you think on sustainable harvest, making it a local requirement rather than a statewide requirement. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that question. Hopefully I can earn your vote, sir. Sustainable harvest, I believe, is more voluntary than even state or at the local government level. We've got several agencies and certifying bodies in the United States, FSC and SFI, but there are also other global certification agencies. And it's up to private landowners as well as the state agencies to identify which of these certifying bodies provide the best return long term. And like I said earlier, the problem with being in this area is that we are prime real estate for urban growth as well. So not only are we going to see one or two harvests, maybe more in the area, but eventually that's going to be it, and then it's going to be rezoned for urban use. It's just a fact of where we're at and the growth patterns in Washington State. So I would say that it's more voluntary based, and we currently are voluntarily certified at SFI in state lands.
I completely agree with your notion about how we can spread this around from the state as a whole to the counties and at least the DNR regions. But another way we can do this is we harvest kind of like in a wave. And by creating multi-story sustainable forests throughout the state and then going in and taking out a few trees at a time at the right time may be a better option than just going in and doing a complete clear cut. Having said that, on this side of the state, clear cutting is something that works, especially in those areas where we have to provide higher profit and higher yield. So it is something that we need to look at, and I agree with you completely that there's better ways. We are the wood basket of the world. We grow wood in Washington State, Oregon, and Northern California faster, of better quality than anywhere else on this planet. And in so doing, why not use that advantage to our advantage?
So the context of sustainable harvest, we have to recognize that our forests are critical for environment and our economy. And that means we have to have a balance. It is not fair for one community to get the brunt of it compared to other communities. We need to, one, increase FSC certification. It's about 1.6% of our forest. It's tiny. We need to be increasing that. Two, we are losing working forest lands. For the last 20 years, we've been losing working forest lands across the state. We have to find a way to start to, one, prevent further sprawl and develop on it. Two, to actually increase the number of forest lands we have in our state because we're going to need them even more. The other context that I think is critical is that if you look at the eastern Washington, part of the challenge is the mills have shut down. So there's no reason for the timber industry to be investing over there. That's a problem, right? That's where we lose the balance. And that's also what leads to our forests being on fire because now they're not being managed properly.
So a sustainable yield is different, very different on the west side of the state than it is on the east side. Eastern Washington's forest, dryland, for the most part, forests are yielding about $17 an acre. in merchantable timber. That's unless they're burned and we have to salvage log them. Whereas Western Washington, we're getting about 160 average, depending on market conditions. So I agree that we're the wood basket. However, it has to be managed so that it's not just a one-time wood basket. And what the DNR, state, and federal forests are increasingly doing is looking at sustainability on a landscape scale and looking at forest resilience. So that's your public land, that's federal and state public land, and then to talk with private landowners about the same thing. I agree with you, it should not be one size fits all for the entire state of Washington and go. I think the county concept is interesting. I like the watershed concept because it allows us to manage the landscape.
So I want to step back on this conversation because some of the land the DNR manages are lands for our counties, and it is separate than what we get for our schools. So counties are one of our customers, and we should be in regular conversation with our counties about what the goals are, that we have clarity of understanding, and that we all have agreed to what our solutions look like. So there should be no surprises. If this is county land, there should be no surprise to our elected county officials and our county governments if we are going to cut there. This has to be an ongoing conversation, and we do need to change and understand we have a responsibility to talk with our customers. Most of the time, we're bringing in that additional information they need and the knowledge to help maximize the resources. But this is a partnership. This is not one group showing up and saying, here's what's going to happen.
We're going to start the next question with Steve here.
Thank you all for being here, taking the time, and for being well studied and well versed on what you're sharing. My name is Bill Turner. I'm with Sierra Pacific. Washington DNR was really progressive in setting up a habitat conservation plan for the lands and taking care of trying to establish some certainty for wildlife and habitats, as well as some certainty for the trust beneficiaries. How do each of you view the HCP, and does it need changes?
I think the HCP is an excellent program. I think that the reason that we have the HCP is to protect the ecosystem as a whole while being able to get in and use and establish healthy working forests. And, you know, Sierra Pacific invested a lot of money to come up here from California because they recognize how well the HCP system is working. We're protecting watersheds, we're protecting our forests, we're building roads in a sensible fashion to protect both, and we're at the same time being able to get in and practice really sound science-based and peer-reviewed type issues of forest and water practices to ensure that we're taking care of our habitat for our wildlife. The one thing I'd like to see a little bit more in the HCP would be ease some of the grazing restrictions that we have and ensure that we can get in and graze.
The HCP came about because under the Endangered Species Act, there was a critical need for property owners to make sure they were being compliant in the context of forestry. The opportunity under HCP is to do an overarching plan for all of the forest land so that it isn't something that each property owner has to go and apply to make under ESA to make sure they're compliant. That is an inefficient, ineffective process. There are, I'm sure, areas where we know that it has not been as efficient as it could be, and that's why we have opportunities like the Olympic Peninsula Collaborative. There are other elements that are outstanding that need to be addressed. But the more that we can bring whole systems under one entire plan rather than piecemeal by piecemeal, it not only helps on the government agency and regulatory side, but it certainly helps property owners and make sure that we're hitting compliance and protection.
I think Mr. Turner hit the nail on the head. It's about certainty. And when there's uncertainty, there is insecurity for companies who are investing in local communities, for people who have employment in the wood products industry, for those who are trying to protect the forest and its habitats and its multiple uses. So it's all about the certainty. And I think the Habitat Conservation Plan brought us certainty, but it also brought us flexibility. because we have opportunities for adaptive management. So as times change, and they certainly do, these are natural dynamic ecosystems. They're not static. From the day that the Habitat Conservation Plan was adopted, we also have the opportunity to look and are constantly looking at what adjustments need to be made, but within those boundaries that provide certainty.
So the positive thing about our habitat conservation plans, and has been mentioned earlier, it brings a sense of transparency and certainty. We all understand what we need to do to meet the requirements to support our species. It makes it more effective if you're in business. It allows you to do better planning if you are a landowner. It gives you more opportunity to be effective if you are the state of Washington. Where our challenges are, and while we've heard the conversation about flexibility, actually one of the things I've heard from current DNR employees is it's very cumbersome. It's very difficult to change. That when we have new scientific evidence, it is very difficult to upgrade our HCP plans to incorporate in that new science. So a little bit like any sort of big complex plan, what we have to figure out how to do is just to kind of take it to that next level. How do we build in that next level of flexibility so as we become more knowledgeable, we can support the HCP plans?
The HCP is overburdensome. Any growth management plans, the ESA, HCP, what they do is they really discourage investment in small plots and make it difficult for maximum profitability for larger plots. Now, I'm not saying slash and dash. That's not what I'm saying at all. But the best way to ensure environmental conservation is to ensure that ownership, that private ownership in the forest. And you do that by creating an environment that encourages investment even from first-time farmers and small use, small lot farmers, because as we all know, a lot of the plots that the state owns are very small plots. So I am very much not in favor of such restrictive and non-flexible management plans across the board.
So as our next question is coming up, yeah, he's coming up here soon. I wanted to just make sure I'm not missing anyone. Have you here, and great. Okay, come on. We'll start with you, David.
So first of all, I would like to thank you all for being here and for the opportunity to ask you questions. And my question is, I'm an Eagle Scout. I've spent plenty of time in the woods, but my primary concern is that, Ms. Porterfield, you keep endorsing the money that is going to our schools. But unfortunately, as a student myself, being in the schools with a mother that is part of the school system working for the schools, I have the opportunity to see the wasteful and fraudulent spending that our schools have been doing. For example, the near exact replica of the TV above you is sitting in our library, recently bought last year. Not only that, but our schools have recently purchased several hundred Google Chromebooks. I would like to ask you your opinions on that.
So I'm, as a mother of 3 boys, I'm just going to say right offhand, it is absolutely critical that our schools are ensuring that they're putting any revenue, and the limited revenue, because that's another point I'm going to get to, absolutely to the best education of our kids, because our kids are our future. It is truth to be said. It's the most important job we have as citizens to ensure that we have great education for our kids. 2, we know that right now the legislature has not failed to adequately fund our schools. It is the decision by the Supreme Court that says the legislature is falling short of meeting their paramount duty. I can only say this, that as a mother of 3 boys, any funding, we, 1, need more funding for schools, but we need to, 2, make sure that all of our funding is going to critical educational resources for our kids and making sure that they are getting the best education possible.
I want to commend our Eagle Scout for participating tonight. Thank you, and for asking your good question. The money that DNR generates for schools actually goes into school construction. So taking up issues about how your schools are investing in equipment and materials for the classroom itself is something that, because you are willing to engage in public process, is something to take to your local school board. And as your community assesses local levies to pay for schools, it's important for the local community to hold the public schools accountable for how that money is actually invested. My kids and my grandkids have all been products of public schools in the state of Washington, and I too care deeply that we don't waste money, either the DNR money that goes to construction or my local tax dollars that go to equipping the classrooms.
Okay, so as Mary said so aptly, the funding, the revenue that DNR generates goes to capital construction, and it goes over to the legislative side of the house, so to speak, to be allocated out, where those funds go into disadvantaged rural communities currently. That is the decision they made. Look, a reason why a lot of us don't like politicians is because they will promise you to fix things. This, as Mary so aptly said, is outside the purview of DNR. And if there is an issue, this is a conversation that you have with your school district, and you look at their purchasing policies and define where you make the changes. And I'll just say, as somebody who has had Campfire Girls and Boy Scouts and everybody in our family, this could be a good opportunity for you.
Mr. Eagle Scout, what was your name? Ian? Ian, I just wanted to make sure I took note of that, and I'll thank you now, and then I'll thank you afterwards, because that was a very good question. Unfortunately, it is outside of the bounds of what the role of the DNR is, as we've heard, so I won't go any further on that. But I do want to mention, as a father of 3 daughters who are school age, and somebody who is in the engineering, math, and sciences department, I think that having the availability of those technologies is very important, especially for for school districts that don't have a lot of funding because of lower land values and things like that. So the tax base is a little bit different. So I would encourage, if you see that there are problems or misuse, to engage political action in those regards, but also work to identify the most efficient and effective use of those tools and other new cutting-edge technologies that could be available for your schools. I highly encourage the use of those. Thank you.
I think you hit the nail on the head with your question, because part of the problem, I think, is it's harder to get those resources into the classroom. It's harder to bring quality teachers in because the administration is top-heavy. It's time to put more teachers and resources in the classroom and not in the administration of schools. And if you took a look at administrator salaries versus teacher salary, you'd probably see that there's a little bit of a problem there in terms of who gets paid the most. I think the same thing holds true, though, with both federal and DNR and other state agencies, in that we've become a reverse pyramid. So there's less people out in the field and more people in high-paid bureaucratic jobs at the top end. And let's try to turn that around and put rangers back out in the forest. Let's put foresters back out in the forest, and people out and biologists looking at water and tidelands and forest health in the field, rather than a top-heavy organization. At DNR, my first move will be to take a look at those top 10 positions in DNR and revisit them.
I'll be honest with you, that's a fascinating discussion in itself, the relationship between superintendent of public instruction and its fundraising responsibility versus the capital things for the schools. If we took, say, for example, the superintendent of public instruction in here as part of a discussion, that'd be fascinating. Probably for us policy wonks, everybody else might not be as excited about that. That's really, thank you for bringing up that discussion, that's cool. Here. And then we had someone else, I believe. We have 2 more.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Murphy. What are your ideas to reduce government spending and or relieve financial burden on the people? And how would your policies accomplish that?
Who's next?
Mary.
Yeah, Mary, it's you.
Yep, it's Mary.
I appreciate the question because in my entire career, I've always had to work with very limited budgets. I served as the mayor of the city of Spokane during the recession. I've been at DNR during the time we've never recovered from the recession. In my household budget, in my time with the tribes, I never had the opportunity to just pull out a big checkbook and spend, nor would I want to. But because all of us need to make sure that our public funds are being spent with the same frugality that we would apply to our household budgets. So what can government do? Government can be sure that we're constantly evaluating our expenditures to make sure they're absolutely necessary. We can always look at restaffing and partnerships. For example, in our fire program, I'm working actively, and it's working for us to leverage government resources with private and local resources. So it's a constant evaluation to make sure that government is not bloated and that government is not wasting the taxpayers' money.
So as a management consultant, I've had the opportunity to work with regional cities as well as the Washington Planners Association into working with them to redesign how they do their work to be more effective in a shorter time period and meeting the needs of their customers. If we can shorten our process, it costs less money. If we can look at how we do our work as a government agency, we can define what does effective look like. And the reality is, effective starts with having conversations like we are tonight, because you can be efficient at a lot of things, but if your stakeholders don't care about it, it does not matter how efficient you are. So we have to be able to identify what we are required to do by law, policy, and statute, and what our stakeholders, you, the owners of all this land, want. That is our responsibility. And from that list and those conversations, we have to figure out how to do this smarter, quicker, faster.
Kimberly, where did you go? You disappeared. Thank you so much for asking that question. I can sum up my answer in 4 words. I am a libertarian. All right, that means that everything that I do and all the policies that I look at, consider, and come up with are focused first and foremost on reducing the size of government, reducing that overhead, reducing the cost, reducing the burden, while also maximizing the return as far as this office is concerned in what those revenue sources are. So being a libertarian, it's actually nice to hear some of the opinions up here suddenly switch from how they would regulate our freedoms to how now they would take on a more libertarian stance in reducing the size of government. So I appreciate that people are coming over to the libertarian side as we speak.
Thanks, neighbor. I'm a conservative. And by conservative, I mean I have 0 debt that I carry other than the mortgage on my house and 1 small car payment that gets paid off, every other bill paid off completely at the end of each month. And government should do that as well. We have bankrupted our children and our grandchildren in this country, and money doesn't grow on trees. As much as I hate to say it, it doesn't. We need to, first off, downsize, as I mentioned in the previous question, downsize the top-heavy bureaucracies in government. They just need to go away. We don't need to have an EPA, for example, that is almost as big as the Department of Defense. We don't need to have a DNR that's top-heavy with people at the top, thus taking away jobs out in the field. Moreover, by having less top-heavy government, the other thing we could do is probably take a look at how we can create forest jobs in the local rural communities to put money in everybody's pocket.
So every one of us works hard for our money, and we want to make sure that every dollar that we are having to let go of, that we need to feed our families and educate our kids, is being used wisely. Our responsibility in government is to be as efficient and as effective as possible, to be with the money that we're trusted to by the people. A key component then is making sure that every time we see opportunity, every time we're doing any type of activity, that we're looking for the most efficient way to do it, to make sure we're reducing those costs. And lastly, I'm going to just say one of the huge opportunities that DNR has that many of our other governmental agencies don't have is the ability to actually increase revenues. That means the more we're able to raise the revenues on our public lands through those leases, the less we're having to demand in tax dollars. That's a huge, huge opportunity that not only creates revenue for government and management of the issues that you brought up here today, but also revenue for the local communities and their economy.
Okay. This gentleman right here.
Thank you. Roy Runyon, private citizen. The question I have, some of you have tried to answer. You've all declared as partisan candidates. We've got 3 Democrats, a Republican, and a Libertarian, we heard. So what values or principles would you bring to the office of State Land Commissioner?
I think it's Karen.
Wow, I wish everybody was interested in that question. I start out with respect and trust. Trust that those of us working for you, that you've given us the information about what's important to you and that you are trusting us to bring it back. Transparency. We talked about this earlier with permitting. If you do not know how you are being reviewed, if you do not know what the process is, it is very difficult for you to have a successful outcome. There should be openness. We need to have these conversations about how do we manage our lands in the 21st century. We need to be open to new opportunities. I could go on, but boy, trust, respect, transparency, and openness, it's amazing what you can accomplish with that.
Thank you so much, Private Citizen Runyon, for that excellent question. As a libertarian, I spend a lot of my life with an extra amount of trust for my fellow citizen, trust that we're going to do the right thing because I'm advocating on all grounds and in all things that I do to return the power to the people, to the private citizen, and to stop this government intrusion. So what I bring is I bring a faith in my fellow man. And as a matter of fact, I was asked a question last week by the Seattle Times. How do you see your initiative of private investment in the forest working when they were inferring that people won't do the right thing? And I said, because I have faith that when given an opportunity to thrive, when given an opportunity to succeed, that folks are going to invest in that land and that they're going to make the right choices for themselves, for their own pocketbook, but also for the future of the state and for their children. So I have faith in folks that they're going to do the right thing. And I look to largely turn over the investment in our lands to those private citizens, and I have faith that we will do the right things to restore a healthy forest to Washington State.
I think the biggest value that I bring is I'm a servant leader. And if you call some of the people that work for me as a naval officer, they will tell you the same. I look to my people to do the right thing, and I trust my people to do the right thing without micromanaging. And I've done that with up to 11,000 people at any one time. So the key is and at the same time, to be able to turn to people that are trying to get you to do something that's not right, to act as that roadblock to them in order to ensure that our people can do their job. The other thing I look to is, as a servant leader, I look to you, to the people of this state, to make sure that I am serving them, not anybody else. My job is to serve all of you. And that's what a servant leader is. And that's how you build trust in me to lead the people of DNR and to do the right thing within DNR.
So my values, one is respect and responsibility. It is our responsibility in managing our public lands and waterways not to just manage them for today, but to manage for future generations, our children's generation. Two, and you and I know this very carefully because you and I both served on a city council at the same time. The worst time you could ever be in public office in a way, it was the recession. Two is leadership and vision, that when we have a challenge in front of us, it's to sit down and figure out how to solve it, not to just say we can't. In that context, I helped create an energy program, not just for the community that I served, but for all of the neighboring communities, because when we had an economic recession and people's jobs were lost, it was our responsibility to make sure we were helping to put people back to work, to get the education opportunities, to create a new clean energy economy, and I worked closely with you, and I was honored to do that. Third, I would say, is collaboration and cooperation. I truly believe we need to move away from this party and that party. Much of my work has been being able to work on both sides of the aisle, whether it's in the legislature, in Olympia, or whether it's in local government, because it's only when we actually break down the barriers and the things that consistently divide us and try to understand where people are coming from and work to solve it together that we get things done. Otherwise, we're polarized and we fail.
He was about to jump out of his seat. Mary, you get to wrap this up.
Our timekeeper has a tough job. I believe that public service is nonpartisan. Good public servants are, it's a nonpartisan approach. And I have a mnemonic that I use, and I've used this in my public service for many years, and the mnemonic is hot stuff, although now that I have wildfire responsibility, I'm thinking about making it cool stuff. But it stands for honest, open, transparent, sustainable, thoughtful, understandable, and fair. And if we conduct our government behavior according to those principles, then our stakeholders will be involved, our employees will be involved, that the public will understand what we do and why we're doing it, and we will be open to answering questions, and we'll be open to being flexible to accommodate the needs of the public. So those are the principles I've stood on for many years. They work, and they allow me and the people who work for me to be good public servants.
And the next question will start with Steve here. And this time,
I live in Tahuya, and I wanted to know if anybody here, a logger, would like to have all of my trees. They're just so big and so bad that I can't live with them anymore. They don't have to pay. I'm not asking them to give me any money, but I'd surely love to have them go away.
Doesn't sound like there's a question there,
Yeah.
but it sounds like
Sierra Pacific needs to meet with you.
I was going to say there's a resource
right there. The gentleman in the blue shirt can help.
Yeah. I think there are enough forestry folks here that
I mean, you come and get them, all of them. They're big, huge things like this, and you're eating up my bedroom.
I actually
So
would,
who
I'll speak with her afterwards.
Okay.
Maybe we can help as a small forest
Yeah.
landowner.
Yep.
And I see some forestry folks in here that probably could help her as well. So make yourself available.
Yes.
Okay, we have one more question. How's it going there, Bill?
And I'm assuming this one will come to me. Okay, thank you. I did solve that problem.
Thank you. I'm kind of a late arrival here. That's being an old geezer. I fell asleep after I ate dinner, and I woke up and had to think of make a dash down here. I have a question for you. The Department of Natural Resources plays a significant role in keeping the health of our waters, especially the Hood Canal. We've had a number of years of disaster in the Hood Canal, and I would like your position on this and what you would propose as policy to make sure the Hood Canal and the waters of the canal stay alive and clean.
All right, excellent question. Thank you for bringing us dinner is what I heard you were going to do. You're bringing us dinner as well, right?
Yeah, I forgot to put my hearing in.
Right, there you go.
He had your dinner.
There you go. That also works.
You had their dinner.
It's an excellent question, and it deserves a serious answer. And the answer is this. If we open ourselves to investment in healthy water, just as much as we open ourselves to investment in healthy forests and healthy agricultural lands, then we win as a state. Things like 3D saltwater farming are a great opportunity for kelp beds and vertical clam and oyster type beds that do water filtration and solve some of those impurity issues that we have in saltwater. But the problem really is the entire system together. You have to have healthy forests that filter water. You have to have healthy buffer zones. You've got to have healthy workable lands. When we allow our forests to burn up, then you get a lot of runoff and you get a lot of pollutions. You get so you have to look at it as a whole, and I think that we all kind of agree on a healthy land, healthy water, healthy air platform. One thing that I would do above and beyond is really look at opportunities for investment for those future markets. 3D farming in the saltwater is one of them.
So, healthy ecosystems, as Steve mentioned, are very important to the problem specifically with the Hood Canal. And DNR certainly would play a role in ensuring that our waterways and any water feeding into the Hood Canal are clean. And this is another deal where we have to work with the Department of Ecology and even the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and National Marine Fisheries Association to look at the real root problem of what's causing these low oxygen levels in the Hood Canal. It's bigger, I think, than just DNR. And so this is where we have a chance to collaborate across not only government agencies, but with the residents of the Hood Canal to come up with solid, collaborative approaches and issues. Again, this is a science-based issue that we have to really focus on to get the right answers to fix this problem.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for making it down here. This is one of the areas that I've spent 20 years of my career working in, is protecting our shorelines, because like the Hood Canal, when we lose the health of our aquatic ecosystem, you can't get it back again. You can't get it back again. So number one, the first key piece is that with all of any leases and any use of our bedlands, which is what we would be, DNR has the authority over, we would make sure that we're applying best available science. That science informs not only the leases that we're putting in effect and making sure that we have strong environmental protections in those leases, but also that we're preventing the leasing to destructive activities that once implemented, we won't be able to restore that habitat again. I had to stop because I knew what you were going to do next. I really, well, I took it back.
That's like talking to the judge, isn't it?
Mary.
So protecting the aquatic environment, it starts upland, and our good upland management is going to make sure that what flows into the aquatic environment is clean, and that we avoid sedimentation and pollutant discharges. And we do that with forest land management, with agricultural land management, and even local communities can do that with the use of the infrastructure around cities and communities. Using the terms of our leases is also important, as Hillary mentioned, making sure that those leases are appropriate and include the environmental safeguards. And then also educating our marine users, both commercial and recreational. The impacts may seem small, but they're cumulative of boating activity, whether it's commercial or recreational. And those pollutant discharges into our waterways actually do have a cumulative impact on the Hood Canal's health. So that's an education component, much more than it is a regulatory component.
This is a wonderful opportunity for partnerships. This is not an issue that any one agency or group is going to be able to solve. This is us working together. This is DNR, this is ecology. These are the local communities we serve. As Mary said, we do need to look at our filtration, our watersheds, how we are protecting our streams. That is critical. We also have to address and talk about how we bring our beaches and our near shores back to health, to have the reestablishment of eelgrass. We also need to have conversations with our communities as they are building about runoffs that happen. Sweden's doing some interesting work where they are placing vertical mussel beds next to outflow pipes where the mussels filter and clean the water that is coming down. Those mussels are then harvested and used for fertilizer, and that they are finding that this is a very effective way to keep and manage water.
Okay, so my mind is short. We had your response to this question?
Oh, yes, but if you're giving me another opportunity, I give you.
You'll have an opportunity right now, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, well, are there any more questions? Okay, great. Let's move to the flash round here, where each of you will have 1 minute to talk about why, after answering all these questions, people should vote for you for Commissioner of Public Lands. We'll start on your end this time, Mary, and work this way. And then I'll have some housekeeping things at the end for you, and also a special prize from Diedrich here that you'll enjoy
Is
when
this
you
to
get
act as
home.
our closing statement, more or less?
This is your closing
Thank
statement?
you.
I think you've heard from all of us candidates here tonight that we have a big passion for good natural resource management. We all have ideas, visions, and goals for the Office of Commissioner of Public Lands. What I bring to my candidacy is I've had actual hands-on experience for many years in the complexities of a huge natural resource management agency. I've had to negotiate union contracts during the budget. I worked with state and federal legislature on policy and budget appropriations. I've worked through complex budgets such as these that we have to manage at DNR on a multiple scale over multiple years. I know how to manage people so that we can accomplish the work of the agency, and I've had large workforces that I've had to motivate, empower, and do the good work that's required of a government agency. So I bring many years of experience in precisely the portfolio of duties of the Commissioner of Public Lands. I also bring the passion and the vision. I have goals for forest health. I have goals that I'm already implementing for forest health and wildfire, goals for aquatic lands, goals for how we're going to deal with making our governmental agency more efficient for you, the people. I'm Mary Werner, and I'm asking for your support.
Your community is most impacted by DNR. Agriculture, forestry, recreation, aquatics. I have 20 years of experience working across the state in almost 3/4 of the counties of the state, bringing in the areas of aquatics, forest health and protection, and agricultural health and protection. I'm the only one in this race who's actually worked in 3/4 of the counties of the state on those specific issues. I bring the policy, the technical, legal, and scientific experience to it, as well as the local community context, whether it's in the most eastern part of our state, the most western, or whether it's at the water level, or whether it's at the land use level. I also bring to this a context of understanding that we are in a new era. We have to be bringing new ideas and new visions and new opportunities in the context of renewable energy and increased agricultural production on our ag lands, because with our challenges in front of us, population growth, climate change, and struggling rural and local economies, we have to be creating new opportunities that are for the environment as well as the economy. Thank you.
I'm Steve McLaughlin. I'm a retired naval officer, and the one thing I bring to the table for this position is leadership and ability to manage in a large, disparate organization. As far as taking care of the people of the state of Washington, I'm a servant leader. But I also listen to the people, and I've been listening to the people ever since I started this campaign. I understand forest ecology, I understand some of the complex issues, and I want to work to collaborate with people across all the various lines, from the environmental side to the conservationist side, to ensure that we do come up with the right science-based, peer-reviewed solutions that will help us make this state better. To open up our forest lands for harvest and our agricultural lands to increase revenues, to protect that public trust, and also to ensure that we have the opportunity to create jobs in these economically stressed rural towns and cities across our state. My name is Steve McLaughlin, and I would appreciate your vote.
I'm the other Steve, the first Steve in the race. You can get my bio and everything online. What I want to do is take this minute to share with you a story, kind of why I'm in the race and the way that I look at it. As an innovator myself, I think a little bit differently, and as an engineer, I like to see things in full solutions. And the way that I see this is the story of the hummingbird. And there's an old parable, and it says the forest caught on fire, and all the animals fled the forest, except for one. There was one animal that was busy working, trying to put out the forest fire. And all of the large animals watched, and it was a hummingbird, one drop at a time, working from the river back to the forest. And all of the animals said, "What are you doing? Don't you see that you're not having any effect?" And he said, "Yes, but I'm doing everything that I can do to the best of my ability. I know that I don't have all of the answers. I know I don't have all of the solutions. It's my job to build a team of hummingbirds to solve the problems, and we're going to do it one drop at a time, and we are going to fix the problem that the DNR has built up over decades and decades of poor forest management." Thank you.
So this is the most important job nobody knows about. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we've had a 20-year decline in revenue generated by DNR. That's what brought me into this race. I am committed to education as a long-term educator, as well as working as a volunteer in our education system. I have a deep belief that we can craft government that serves us, the people, and I am passionate about the environment, the ability to meet our conservation and our environmental agenda. Bill Ruckelshaus said it best when I was talking to him about this race, when he said, a healthy environment and a strong economy are intertwined. You cannot separate them. That is the 21st century vision that I have for DNR, that we are part of the community. We serve the people. We help provide our children with the tools they need for education in the 21st century. That is why I'm running, and that is why I would like to be your next Commissioner of Public Lands.
Great, thank you. And thank you, candidates, for your willingness to come here and your willingness to run.
Thank you, sir.
I'm very impressed with your thoughtful answers, your minimal use of three-letter acronyms. Very good. And you did really well. Thank you very much for coming all the way here to Belfair for us. We'd like to thank everybody that came to see this, because an educated public is a great public, and Belfair is a very active community in that regard. I'd like to thank the North Mason Community Voice for the opportunity to have this forum. Did a great job with that. Thank you. Thank you. And Diedrich, who's also, I think, communicating with Mars with this equipment here.
Thank you.
MasonWebTV.com is the website, and he assures me that it will be immediately available online at that site. So you'll be able to see that there. Thanks for everybody for coming. It was great. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.